Good morning, everyone. My name is Brad Rutherford, and this is.
I'm Reed Duke. How you doing, Brad?
I'm good. I'm good. Yesterday was great. I had a great time. I know you had a great time. Noah probably had a great time. But we saw a whole bunch of cool stuff with Modern. We saw Mono Black Deck go 8-0. We saw a lot of preordains recently unbanned. You and I cast that really great four-color Omnath mirror. We're going to get started in just a moment with round one of the day. I think they just started, right?
Yeah. So you're actually setting us up well for the feature match we're going to cover. Um, because on one side of the table, we have Michael Wyzakowski with four-color, an Omnath four-color deck, which Honorog told us was one of the most represented here on day two after the cut. But also, Michael's deck is very, very different from both of the four-color decks that you and I covered yesterday. So we saw one yesterday that featured Karn the Great Creator and everything that comes with that. We had one that was kind of delighted halfling into planeswalkers. That's what I would consider the most classic version of four color. But Michael's deck I would describe as effectively blue-white control with just Omnath and Ren and Six to sort of grease the gears.
Oh my, that is very different. Are there preordains in this deck?
No preordains, no
Oh, okay.
preordains. But hoping to operate a lot of instant speed, counterspell, force of negation, dress down in one of the flexible slots, which I think is a cool one. And then, we would be loath to not talk about the opponent. Ian Friedman is our one perfect record player at 8-0 with mono black midrange,
Boy,
which is not necessarily a deck that I expected to see at 8-0. That's very, very cool.
boy, and this isn't like the Cabal Coffers decks of yore either. This is something different. It looks kind of like the Rakdos deck, but in that it has Grief and Thoughtseize and a bunch of spot removal, but obviously doesn't have any of the red cards. What is he doing instead?
Yeah, so this is a non-Cabal Coffers mono black deck. I'm sure a lot of people at home will be surprised to hear that. But for a little background, I worked for Pro Tour Lord of the Rings with Aspiring Spike, who's a really, really popular modern streamer. And this black deck was Spike's favorite deck. It was his front runner for most of our preparation. And so what he found was like, okay, Cabal Coffers is going too big. It's unnecessary to generate 10 or 12 mana to win the game because the really sweet spot is the 4 mana plays. So that includes the One Ring, it includes Shoulder the Apocalypse, it includes, Grief if you're going to be hard casting that one. So this is just a mono black, like sort of mid range in the truest sense deck, and it's, as you said, has a lot of the strengths of Rakdos Scam, but just a little more staying power, a little bit less about that scam element, and a little bit more about like, all right, let's just kill the opponent's stuff, get some card advantage, and win a game fair and square.
Fair and Square is the name of the game, and Ian, of course, starts it off fair and square with a Thoughtseize on Michael. Michael revealed Omnath, double prismatic ending, a pair of lands, and Teferi Time Raveler went to the graveyard. How do you feel about that choice?
Yeah, it makes sense. One of the things about thought seizing in a mid-range deck like Ian Friedman's Mono Black is you want to be adaptable. It's not like you're putting Thoughtseize in your deck to always take away Teferi. You use the context of your own hand, you use the information that you gain from seeing your opponent's hand, and you punch a hole in their game plan. So, okay, Michael has tons of removal spells. I'm not necessarily going to get my Dothy Voidwalker to go uncontested, but that's fine. Instead, I'll make the game about card advantage. So I'll leave Michael with a bunch of lands and removal spells, and then I'll make my plan about, resolving the One Ring or a Planeswalker or whatever it might be.
Yep, and you're right. Now, Ian did. He knows about the double prismatic ending. That's why Michael's playing with those cards face up. Uh, but went ahead and led with the Voidwalker anyway because you can't play around everything.
Right,
Those
yeah,
were
it's just the kind of thinking that this trade is going to be inevitable, so I might as well spend my mana and make the trade sooner rather than later.
Quick question about whether or not Prismatic Ending is exiled after being cast on Deithy Voidwalker.
Do you happen to know the answer to that? I would guess that it's not exiled.
Well, what's interesting is it was exiled.
In a literal sense, yeah, that's true. So that's a trick, a subtle one, because when you lightning bolt a Deithy Voidwalker, the lightning bolt resolves fully before the damage actually kills the Deithy Voidwalker. That's called checking state-based effects. But if a spell just says, kill or exile the Voidwalker, then that will happen as part of the spell resolving. The Voidwalker will be gone already.
You're a judge too?
I'm decidedly not a judge.
Oh, okay.
But I've just seen this come up enough times and asked judges the question enough times that I happen to remember this one.
Well, you are right. Those prismatic endings should be in the graveyard. There's a pair of griefs on the battlefield from Friedman. The first one nabbed the One Ring, and the second one we're tanking on right now. Unfortunately, Michael's missed a couple of land drops, so we're not going to see a ton of action out of here. Force of Negation goes to the graveyard off that grief. And Thought sees number 2.
Yeah, Ian has been just totally ruthless in attacking Michael's hand and leaving him with very small number of resources to work with. And this is exactly exactly how the mono black trick player draws it up. This is what you want to happen. You want to make sure to use your Thought Seizes and your removal spells so that they can't get anything going. And then soon enough, your 2-for-1 card advantages from resolving these griefs eventually just puts you totally in the driver's seat. And look at that. It's like Michael has to lose a card when the grief enters the battlefield, and then 2-for-1 to Solitude 1 away. And I mean, he's just got three resources, 2 lands, 1 card in hand. That's not enough. That's not enough to play a game of Magic.
It's not, and Michael agrees with you because he's picking it up right now. He saw Shelter of the Apocalypse, said, no thank you, and we're going to go to game 2. Boy, it really stinks when a player, when a 4-color player misses their color, misses their land drops, because the deck's so mana hungry. How many lands do they normally even play?
So having a look, Michael has 24. And 24. Often that 24 feels like a lot more than that because it's supplemented by, crucially, Red and 6, and then sometimes also Delighted Halfling or your choice of various cantrip type of effects.
Sure.
But yeah, I definitely agree with you. You want to be hitting those land drops even into the mid and late game when you play these 4-color decks.
Take a peek at his deck. It's a little different than normal, like you mentioned before. There's that Dress Down. It's a rules nightmare, but I love the card. Quad counter spells. What else stands out to you, Reed?
In general, I like this take on 4-color because it's similar to the discussion we had a moment ago about Cabal Coffers and Mono Black. That's really exciting when you can, flood the board with all these crazy planeswalkers and creatures that enters the battlefield abilities, Elish Dorn, Mother of Machines. But at a certain point, it's like that's too big. It's unnecessarily big. Whereas just having a couple of well-placed card advantage effects like your Omnath, like your Red and 6, that's enough to pull ahead in the game. So what Michael is choosing to do is spend the flexible slots on Disruption to correct what would normally be the weaknesses of the 4-color strategy. So what are those weaknesses? Well, it's people that don't want to play a fair game with you. It's a combo deck like Living End or a big mana deck like Urzatron. So instead of just having more of the same in terms of mid-range 2-for-1 type cards that you're tapping out for on your own turn, you're going to play counter spells so that you can stop what the opponent's doing, protect yourself, and have a more well-rounded game plan.
Taking a peek at this mono black midrange, this is also, like you mentioned, a somewhat unique take on a modern archetype. Noah and I talked about this deck a little bit yesterday in our later rounds, and he said that he didn't like the card Knight's Whisper because of how prolific Orcish Bowmasters is in the format.
Yeah,
Do you feel do you
it's a
feel the same
great
way?
thought. It is definitely unintuitive. Like Orcish Bowmasters just got printed, everyone's playing it. There's so many things to punish, drawing extra cards, and yet this mono black deck is so successful playing Knight's Whisper. I also had my teammate Seth Manfield the rack scam deck by Ragavan and adding Knight's Whisper. And my feedback was like, wow, that's so unintuitive to me. It's like you're cutting Ragavan because it's bad against Orcish Bowmasters, but you're swapping it for a card that's also bad against Orcish Bowmasters for a totally different reason. But for whatever reason, that card just is hitting pretty well in terms of the battles that need to be fought and won in Modern right now. It's a pretty grindy format. And just having like a 2 mana play that helps you bridge the gap to your powerful 4 mana cards and provide a guaranteed card advantage. It actually does just do a lot of what you're looking for.
Sure. Well, thankfully, Ian is not playing against Bowmasters this game, so those cards should shine. We are into turn 2 for Michael in game 2. He's down a game. He's fetched for a Triome and played a land and passed over to Friedman for the second turn. No turn 1 Thoughtseize this game. Suppose you don't need to turn 1 Thoughtseize against 4-color, do you, Reen?
Yeah, so these two decks, the way they match up is we're going to expect a paced out game where the players are going to be much more concerned about getting maximum value out of all their cards, more concerned about lining up the right answers against the right threats, and a little bit less about just pure speed and let me play out my hand as quickly as possible and get a big advantage. I don't think that's going to be how the games are likely to play.
Thing. Turn 2 Voidwalker for Friedman, just like last game, and 2 Triomes for Michael, just like last game. Help us out, chat. Which Triomes are those? Because I don't recognize the alternate art. I would guess that he has Domain though.
Yeah, yeah. I'm always impressed. People have such nice collections. When I cover live Magic, it's like you need a pair of sunglasses to to see what's going on in some of these all foil decks.
There we go. Thank you, camera guy. Let's see, which Triomes do we have here? Teamer, yeah, Teamer and the Zat. What is that? The Sultai one? Sultai. Knight's Whisper.
Dagoth.
We were just talking about this. Knight's Whisper. Fueling him up. Third land for Friedman.
Knight's Whisper, you could think of it as Ian Friedman's answer to an opposing expressive iteration or an opposing red and 6, just his version of a mid-range card advantage play that's going to get him a little bit ahead and help him set up well going into the mid game. So Brad, let's mention for a second the players' records, because we are showing between this match and our backup match the very top of the standings after day 1. So Ian Friedman with Mono Black is our lone perfect record player at 8-0. His opponent, Michael, is 7-0-1, so presumably took an unintentional draw at some point, but still an excellent record. And then when we do get to our backup match later, that's going to be table 2, where it is another player at 7-0-1 facing off against 7-1. From there, plenty of players still in the tournament at 7-1, 6-2, and very much in striking distance of the top 8.
Yeah, this is going to be exciting. This is a 4-slot RCQ. So the top 4 of the event eventually will advance to DreamHack. Sorry, is it Atlanta? DreamHack Atlanta?
That's right.
Yeah,
in December.
In December. We're looking at a Thoughtseize from Friedman. And Michael has revealed Teferi Time Raveler, Solitude ×2, and Omnath Locus of Creation. and a pair of lands in the hand. Friedman's in the tank. This is kind of a difficult one. What are you taking here, Reed?
Uh, well, Ian answered the question for us in terms of getting rid of one of the solitudes. I think the main difference between this game and last game is that we're actually getting into the realm where there's those solitudes are going to be hard cast for 5 mana and provide card advantage instead of card disadvantage. So Ian probably just identifies that and he says, I'm going to take the strongest card in the long term, which I do think is a pretty good default if you're not sure what to take with your thoughts. You just take the most powerful card, expecting the game to go long, and that thing's going to be a problem sooner or later. Another shortcut you could sometimes use is if your opponent has 2 copies of one card and 1 copy of another, you just take the unique card and leave them with 2 of the same. But that's not what Ian chose to do in this particular case.
Well, and I think he might have chosen that given that he was going to follow up with the grief. The double solitudes were threatening to remove it, but that happened anyway. Here's a fatal push. That's going to take care of the Omnath. That was cast earlier. I made a mistake and said that was in his hand, but it's not. Michael's going to take his 5th turn and lead with a top decked the One Ring.
Oh boy.
It's a good top deck.
Yeah, that is really, really good. Now, the good news for Ian Friedman fans is that Orcish Bowmasters does match up pretty well against the One Ring, and Ian doing the correct thing of responding to the spell of the One Ring so that you, first of all, can target your opponent with at least the first trigger before they gain protection from everything. And then also so that the Bowmasters will be in play once Michael's ready to start drawing.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Michael's been playing really well. Every time he's on camera, it's been a pleasure. There is Children the Apocalypse.
This is the mono black player's best answer to the One Ring, since you can't literally remove it from the battlefield. The best thing you could do is try to punish the opponent for drawing extras. So Michael's going to choose to Otawara the Shuldred, which at face value is just buying a little bit of time, but when you have the One Ring active, buying a little bit of time can also mean digging to a more permanent version of an answer.
So we got real quick judge call. While we're doing that, while the judge is handling that, let's talk about this. The mono black deck has looked good all weekend. It's 8-0. Friedman's doing well. I put money on him making top 8. But like you mentioned a second ago, it's got a weakness where it doesn't have an answer to resolve the One Ring. It just has to play around it via Bowmasters and Shieldred. Do you think that's a metagame decision? Do you think that's a choice? Splashing a color seems pretty easy, right? You could splash red or white just to get rid of the One Ring.
Yeah, it's a good thought. And I think I talked about our team's process for approaching the modern format in advance of the Pro Tour, and that was something that was an opinion that I had, was that destroying the One Ring was going to be important, and we ended up playing Yawgmoth, black green Yawgmoth instead, because for us that was still a good way to use Orcish Bowmasters, the One Ring, and Shuldred, but then you could access cards like Haywire Might via Court of Calling, via whatever it might be, and that could exile opposing One Rings as well.
Mhm.
So I thought that yielded a little bit of a more well-rounded strategy. But the other side of the coin is, don't underestimate the value of sticking monocolor. It means you never have mana problems. It means you don't take damage from your lands. It means you don't have to worry about Blood Moon. And it just generally things operate really, really smoothly every single game you play, and those qualities add up.
That's a good point. Thank you for saying that. We're back after the judge call, and we've served an attack from Friedman's side. And post combat, we've played a Turok Dread Cantor. And Michael has looked like he cycled a Veil of Summer. Air quotes around cycled. I know you can't see me.
Yeah, so we have word from our folks on the floor that the judge call a moment ago was about the missed 1 damage that the burden counter of the One Ring should have dealt in the upkeep. These players, of course, have a lot of tricky stuff going on with protection from everything from the One Ring, hexproof from black with Veil of Summer, Orcish Bowmasters triggers everywhere. So one thing that is unintuitive if you have not seen this stuff before is if the Bowmasters can't target the opponent, you have a mandatory trigger and you have to deal damage to either yourself or something that you can control. So a lot of times the Bowmasters player will deal 1 to the Orc army itself as they amass, but it's still generally upside because that creature is now 5/5 and counting.
Yep. All fixed now. Thanks, judges. Looks like we are prismatic ending on the Bowmasters, activating the One Ring, draw some cards. Michael down to single digits, staring down a 5/5 and a Turox, a 2/1. Another the One Ring.
Yeah, so this is really nice from Michael in terms of both resetting the burden counters and gaining a turn where he just doesn't have to worry at all about the 5/5 army and the Turok. What he does have to worry about is the known Shieldred still in Ian Friedman's hand, although, as we talked about, the One Ring has drawn 6 additional cards, or 7, counting the second One Ring here. So that's ample opportunity to have found an answer to Shieldred.
Yeah, this game's a little bit closer than it might look if you're just glancing at the life totals.
So sometimes bad practice to speculate what the players are talking about, but I'm guessing that they're just having a conversation about whether or not Michael has protection from everything this turn. So in a tournament setting, the One Ring this counts as an invisible trigger, which means that you can either say it as the One Ring enters the battlefield. You can say, I have protection from everything until next turn. Or you can just consider it invisible trigger and mention it at any point where it comes up. So what Michael did there, presumably, is he just played the One Ring, drew a card, then when Ian attacked, Michael reminded everyone that he did indeed have protection from everything.
You're absolutely right. It's just like Exalted from Noble Hierarch or Prowess from Monastery Swiss Spear. Invisible. Just like the One Ring. That is a dress down. Michael flashed in, presumably on his draw step, to take away Sheldred's abilities, though there was at least one trigger, I'm sure. Another prismatic ending on Turok Dread Cantor.
Oh man, that's techie. You dress down to make the creature lose protection from white, and then you kill it right off with a white spell.
That is fantastic. I haven't seen that in a while. Activating the One Ring, Michael's going to draw a pair of cards. Down to 7, facing a Shieldred. At a functional 5 because of the One Ring that will eventually trigger. Here comes Teferi to help save the day. We're going to bounce the big token.
Permanent answer to the Orc army, but Michael is, this is a shields down moment. He does not have protection. He's going to take 4 in combat from the Shieldred, and then have to worry about dying to the triggered ability. What Michael would really love to have is an instant speed way to kill Shieldred like a Solitude. Attack you.
Yeah, the luxury of ignoring Teferi Time Raveler is that is a privilege right there. Friedman drops a land, has a single card in hand, and is passing the turn, banking on Shieldred and the One Ring to finish off Michael. Michael flashing in.
Leyline Binding, which is a perfect answer to the Sheoldred. And now we see Michael at the precarious life total of 1, but kind of likely to run away with the game with just this massive card advantage.
It's kind of exciting. This is a place that, man, I love these matches where you're just teetering on the edge and pulling out a victory. There's Omnath. That's step 1 in taking over the game.
Yeah, though the downside is Michael cannot. Well, okay. I was about to say Michael can't fetch at 1 life, but the Omnath trigger will be plenty to set him up with 5 life and be able to fetch and re up that mana.
Friedman's going to pull the trigger on it's either a demolition field or a field of ruin before the Omnath resolves. Field of ruin it is. That gets both players a basic.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about this play because on the one hand, you definitely don't want to do this after Omnath resolves. On the other hand, Field of Ruining someone during their main phase when they have a bunch of cards in hand actually nets them mana. So personally, I would have liked to see Ian do this maybe on his own turn or just not at all.
What do you think the purpose of this is? Are there only like 4 basics in Michael's deck? Is that what is? Are they strip mines now? Is that why Ian's doing this?
That is correct. Yeah, so having a quick look at the deck lists, it's exactly 4 basic lands. So this is something that can happen with the mono black deck is you just fully run your opponent out of lands. I will just remind everyone that even though Brad and I have access to deck lists, the players do not have one another's deck lists. So some amount of a guessing game, but Ian Friedman
Sure.
just has these lands at his disposal and not much else to do with his mana. So at a certain point, you might as well try.
Yeah. Yeah, the deck thinning is probably marginal, but there was a small chance Michael only had like 3 basics in his deck or something, right? Friedman doesn't know. Michael takes his turn and passes. He's gained 4 life off of the Omnath trigger. Friedman's going to pull the trigger on another Field of Ruin type effect.
Once again, the One Ring just so impressive in this Omnath deck. Omnath providing life gain, getting the influx of mana to cast all of your extra spells, having the free spells of Solitude, Force of Negation. And if you flash back to the earlier portion of this game, things were looking really good for Ian Friedman. Michael Wyzakowski picked up the One Ring off the top after a flurry of discard spells, and then things just spiraled out of control from there.
Here's Murderous Cut. I had a bit of a giggle yesterday when I saw this card because I haven't seen it since like 2015, and
Yeah, that's my favorite is seeing strange one of cards like Murderous Cut show up in Modern, where the player just has the thought, well, I need to do this very exact specific job, and let me go deep in the tank of what card is perfect for accomplishing what I need to accomplish.
And there it is. So that, let's see. Tick up on Teferi, attack with Omnath. Michael should be at 2, I believe, because of the One Ring. A fetch land for Michael is going to trigger Omnath again. Now here's where the real action starts for Michael. I know we're on like turn 9 or something, but untapping with an Omnath and a fetch land, it's pretty good, right?
And a One Ring.
Oh my.
So while Michael does his thing, I want to address question we had in chat earlier, which is how many players made it to day two? It is an even 50 players still competing in the MXP Modern Headliner event. So that's actually a relatively steep cut. 6-2 is not an easy record to achieve. But the good news is that if you make it this far, 50 players, you have a very, very good chance of finishing in the money. I believe it's top 32 who earn money. And then if you're one of these players really high in the standings in our feature match, only a couple more wins before you're knocking on the door of top 8.
Absolutely. And I think we're watching Michael take over this game. Ian's doing that thing where he's like, I want to see what you've cast this game. You have resolved like 14 spells, 20 spells. Who knows? Maybe we're scooping it up soon. That was a fresh 1 ring from Michael on his last turn, and now at 9 life. One more time, take a look at the graveyard. It's the calculus of, do I have an out? No. Time for game 3.
One of the unsung heroes of that game, Brad, I think, was the Veil of Summer, which protected Michael against Torok Dread Cantor and just sort of allowed him the breathing room at the crucial moment to take over the game. So 2 copies of Veil of Summer. That's no doubt just one of the best cards in the format against Mono Black. And Michael's going to be really hoping to have a solid draw with Veil of Summer to protect against a discard spell or a removal. But the good news, if you're a fan of Ian Friedman, is that Ian gets to be on the play. So first opportunity to grief or Thoughtseize.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I think I kind of undersold that when we were going through that play. That Veil of Summer was a big deal. Do you think sideboarding strategies change here? I'm always curious of other people's thoughts. When you're a discard heavy deck like Friedman, are you switching gears between play and draw against something like Omnath?
My experience as a Thoughtseize player myself is that this is one of the archetypes that I think changes the least between play and draw. Because you're really just focused on the general exchange of resources and um, the cards that can provide you the most value and answer your opponent's stuff the most effectively. Those are the ones that you're going to want, regardless of play and draw. Now, there are certainly a few cards that have a meaningful change based on play and draw in this matchup. Veil of Summer being a big one, although even on the draw, that is just clearly strong enough for Michael to have as many copies as he has access to in his deck. But something like Counterspell. Counterspell is a card that's really strong when you could be even or ahead in the game. But if you're behind against a Dothy Voidwalker or an Orcish Bowmasters that's amassing turn after turn, having too many counterspells can be a bad thing. So that's the type of card that I think the players will maybe decide has changed in value based on the play and the draw.
Okay. Good answer. Good answer. I'm going to pick your brain while I have you here about on strategies. All right, we're shuffling up for game 3. Friedman's going to be on the play. He has to be happy about that. This is hopefully he'll get a chance to fire off his Thoughtseizes before the Veils of Summer. At least I'm sure that's what he's thinking.
Right. So the best thing Ian Friedman could see in his opening hand is the we'll call it the mini scam package of Grief plus Blackguard plus Malakir Rebirth. It's not as heavy on this as the Rakdos deck that we're used to, which that deck plays Grief and Fury, and usually around 6 copies of the Malakir Rebirth Undying Evil type of effect. But Ian Friedman still does have that built into his deck, 4 copies each of Grief and Malakir Rebirth. The second best thing that he could see in his opening hand is just a decent draw with turn 1 Thoughtseize. That's going to be really effective against a 4-color control player. And then failing that, just anything with a decent mix of lands and spells, a 2-mana play like Orcish Bowmasters or Night's Whisper is great, especially after a mulligan. but we're going to see if he's happy enough to keep his 6.
Looks like both players are going to 6. We'll take a look at 7 and put 1 on the bottom, thanks to the new mulligan rules. I say new, but the most
by
recent.
our standards, Brad, but for folks that have been around as long as us, it's the new mulligan rule.
Yeah, I was going to try to avoid talking about how long we've been playing Magic because, we've probably seen like 4 different mulligan rules at this point. But
well, to put it in perspective for me, the only card in Modern that was printed before I started playing is pretty much Lightning Bolt. Only stuff that's from Alpha Beta Unlimited is before my time.
Yeah. Big same. I was there near the beginning. Michael's going to go to 5. Boy, that's got to feel bad against a discard deck.
Yeah, most definitely. So the card that Michael really wants to, both see in his opening hand and still have in his hand by turn 2 is Renin 6. Renin 6 is the best card in Modern for recouping after you have an initial resource disadvantage from these mulligans. But by the way, Ian Friedman did not have his first choice or his second choice there of a turn 1 discard spell. He's more on the just lands and spells and settle in for the long game type of plan.
Yeah, turn 1 for both players was simply a land. Turn 2 for Friedman is a fetch into a basic swamp. We're going to see a Voidwalker here. We are. That's a Diothy Voidwalker. Shadow making a big comeback. Michael fetches a Triumph. Not unexpected.
I like this comment in chat. Michael Wyzakowski's shirt is the 4-color Omnath shirt.
Love it.
Red, white, green, blue.
Love it. He's committed to the bit.
It's kind of like the the dude who's got the mountain playmat and the red sleeves and is always playing mono red burn.
Yeah.
Everybody knows somebody like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's one at every event. Prismatic Ending on Diothy Voidwalker. That is the 4th time we've seen that this match. Turn 3 for Friedman is Grief, exiling a Fatal Push, and we're going to take a peek at the One Ring and double Renin 6 and a Flooded Strand.
So key moment, Brad, we're going to see if Ian Friedman has the Malakir Rebirth, because if he does, he gets to absolutely decimate Michael's hand while also presenting a clock. If not, then, oh yeah, here it is.
Indeed, you called it. So with the death trigger on this deck, Malakir Rebirth is going to put Grief back into play tapped, and then one of the 2 Renin 6s are down. Michael with now 3 cards in hand, 2 of which Ian knows, 1 of which Ian knows.
So Michael started with a mulligan to 5 and got double griefed, but I have to say his 5-card hand has been pretty much perfect. So I talked about Renin 6 being one of the best cards to recoup the resource disadvantage. The One Ring would also go in that category. And double griefed, he actually had 3 cards that can give him a very large ongoing resource advantage. And that's just exactly what you want. That's a really favorable set of circumstances for a player who's trying to battle back after mulligan to 5.
You're right. And that unknown card was a Teferi Time Railer, bouncing Grief back to Ian's hand. Normally, that's not something you would do, but Ian's pretty far from casting it again. So,
right. So Ian knows about the Renin 6 in hand and is presumably choosing there whether to, pitch his whole hand to grief away the Renin 6 or instead to hold it and try to cast it for 4 mana.
That was a much more elegant way of saying what I meant. There we go. Renin 6 going to take a point.
Oh boy, Ian must be so pleased with his choice. Can you imagine if he had spent every resource available to him to grief away the Ren and 6, and then Michael just drew another one off the top? That would be heartbreaking, but Ian dodged it and now has a pretty solid board presence of his own. Michael really wants to find a non-land card off the top to either, get some velocity in terms of drawing cards, or answer the grief so that Ren and 6 can stick on the battlefield.
Indeed. Michael, 15, one card in hand, activates Ren and 6 to rebuy a fetch and ships back to Friedman. Friedman with a grief and a
Card
North.
Solitude here.
Solitude does cost 5.
Oh, did
my
you draw
gosh.
it?
You love to see it. There's nothing better than an underdog story. Somebody mulligans a 5 against the Thoughtseize player when all the cookies are on the table for game 3, and they are ripping straight fire off the top. Ooh, headshot.
Yeah, so this is gonna take care of both creatures and gain Michael 3 life and protect his planeswalker. It's just the best thing that could have happened. All right, so correction to that. Ian actually did have removal spell, so that means the 1/1 orc army is going to be safe, and Michael will not be able to block with the Solitude. But just killing off that grief, it means the dust settles, and Michael has Ren and 6 effectively uncontested here.
The hits keep coming.
Yeah, you see Ian Friedman shaking his head.
Omnath off the top for Michael. We've got 2 pretty slow card advantage engines going here. Ren and 6 versus a Castle Lochthwain. But Michael has drawn one of his premier threats from the top of his deck. Friedman tanking. Deploys Malakir Rebirth as its land side.
Yep, and now he's transitioning over to leaning on Castle Lochthwain, which he's very glad to have that, but it's not gonna. He's not gonna have an easy time keeping pace against Omnath and Ren and 6. The Murderous Cut, perfect pickup here. Really nice turn for Ian Friedman.
Oh man, these 2 are just going back and forth. It's great. Michael choosing which fetch he wants with his Ren and 6, deploys it, has a pair of cards in hand, and passes back to Friedman. Friedman off the top gets Diethy Voidwalker.
I believe this is the 4th copy of Ren and 6 coming down to double team the Voidwalker.
Oof. Big oof.
What Michael would honestly, the best card Michael could find here would be a cycling land, like a Triome, because then you could just spend all your mana and your Ren and 6 activation every turn to start drawing extra cards, and it looks like the game is going in that direction where we're really settling in for the long haul here.
It's not much, but it's honest work. All right, Friedman, what do we got? Friedman has a pair of cards to Michael's Uno. Ren and 6 on the battlefield, Castle Lochthwain on the battlefield. Who can slug it out the longest?
And credit where credit's due. If Ian Friedman winds up winning this game or even staying in it, it is just all thanks to this Castle Lochthwain.
Friedman's in the tank. Michael says, I'll fetch while you're doing that. 13 to 18, but the life totals do not tell the whole story here.
Michael just doing a check of how many fetchable lands are left. We're heading down the path of running out of those.
You don't want to fetch with no targets in your library. That is a little embarrassing. All right. Friedman shipped over to Michael. Michael takes a draw. And he's looking to play whatever he just nabbed. Tick up on red and 6, rebuys a fetch. It goes down. Teferi Time Raveler. That's a good one. And in response, Orcish Bowmasters.
It's actually kind of an interesting sequence there where Ian was forced to respond to the Teferi with the flash creature, the Bowmasters. But Michael actually used the Ren and 6 first. In a different world, would have had the opportunity to sort of bait out the Bowmasters and then ping it with Ren and 6. But I'm sure that's not going to be a crucial factor here.
Sure thing. Orcish Army and Orcish Bowmasters are going to the red zone.
Met by an instant speed Supreme Verdict.
Gotta say, Friedman didn't plan that one, huh? Thanks, Teferi. I can cast sorceries on your turn. Gonna try to respond, but
not a legal play.
That is not a legal play. Teferi's on the battlefield. They know it. It's easy mistake to make.
Yeah, if I had a nickel for every time somebody cast a illegal card against Teferi, I'd be a millionaire.
There was a brief period where these invisible static effects were actually much more punitive if you violated them. Narset, the 3-mana Narset, and Teferi here, they ended up being game losses pretty quickly. I judged one event where the harsher rules were in place, and I think I handed out like 4 game losses.
Wow, that's a tough one.
But now, thankfully, the judge community is actually, somewhat invested in making a pleasurable tournament experience, so it's less punitive.
Yeah, as a highly competitive player myself, of course, I can see multiple sides of the argument, and I do, appreciate when there are clear rules and penalties that players and judges follow. But I do really appreciate the overall trend that we're trying to make tournament magic a little bit just more accessible, so somebody doesn't have to be scared to go play their first magic tournament like they're going to get raked over the coals for every little thing. That's very much not how it is. Judges have a lot more flexibility to sort of rule by a player's intent, and we don't consider it cheating when you make a small violation like the ones that we've seen on camera a couple times over the course of the weekend. This is just part of the cost of doing business when we play a game as complex as Magic the Gathering, and everyone kind of has that shared understanding that it's not the end of the world when there's a small mistake.
Have you ever made a mistake, Reed?
Believe it or not, Brad, I have made a mistake before. I know a lot of viewers are going to be surprised to hear that, but no, in reality, it's it's almost every tournament. It's rare. It's rare even for a really really experienced player to play an entire day of tournament magic and not have at least a small number of small things go wrong.
Well, while we were talking about that, it looks like Michael's decided to start winning this game. He now has Ren and 6 on 3, Teferi Time Raveler on 2, Omnath, at least 1 trigger from a fetch land just deployed, and a single card in hand versus Friedman's nothing. Friedman has nothing but a Castle Lochthwain of significance right now. Friedman needs to solve that Teferi for the Malakir Rebirth in his hand to do anything. Thoughtseize. Looking at Prismatic Ending and Leyline Binding. Do we want to take the 1 mana?
So
go ahead.
Pretty solid sequence there. You're going to take away the instant speed removal, and then you're going to grief away the sorcery speed removal. So Friedman able to get a little something going, but it's not enough to even beat what's on the battlefield for Michael Wyzakowski, and it's definitely not going to be enough if the hits keep coming off the top of the library here.
So it's Grief versus Omnath, Teferi, and Ren and 6. This is the weirdest Gatewatch I've ever seen. We're going to rebuy Flooded Strand and attack in. Michael redeploys that Flooded Strand for like the 9th time this game.
Yeah, Flooded Strand's working overtime.
That is the hardest working fetch land I've ever seen. 10 to 22.
Was that Flooded Strand for Stomping Ground? Not a materially meaningful mistake, but just one that I happened to notice there. But you could just flip it. I think Michael had a Misty Rainforest and a Flooded Strand, and could have just gotten Island and Stomping Ground in a different order.
Yeah, yep. Might have been a dexterity error. We don't have audio. Players can say one thing and do another with their hands. Friedman at live totals are updated. Friedman at 6. Michael at 21. Michael with the clear advantage, but Friedman with some heat off the top.
Chat says it's Temple Garden anyway, so false alarm on my part.
We were just talking about making mistakes, Reed. It's okay. Hey, the One Ring, do you think that's a good Magic card?
The One Ring is excellent. So that is one that might be powerful enough to flip the tables. Now, Ian would have loved to have picked that up a turn or two ago, as now he finds it in a situation where his life total is kind of in the blinking red. But if the right cards come off the top, if he finds a Shuldred that goes unanswered, if he can answer the Omnath, then the One Ring might be enough to lead him to victory. We'll see.
Yep. Small reprieve. Boy, Chad is right. I don't think Michael's naturally drawn a land of any type in like 5 turns. He just keeps ripping off the top and fetching lands instead.
Yeah, one thing about this 4-color deck is it's really difficult to stop the snowball once it starts rolling down the hill, because so many of the cards provide card advantage or draw more cards. You think about something like Omnath, Teferi, the One Ring. It's frustrating enough when you see your opponent draw Omnath off the top because it's a really powerful creature, but it also means that they probably just draw another action card after the Omnath trigger. So it actually takes a lot for the 4-color deck to peter out in a situation like this, and it's kind of like expect the worst each turn when it comes to your opponent's draw step.
So, what is that card, Reed? Michael played a Planeswalker and stole the One Ring?
That is Tibalt Cosmic Imposter, which is a one of in the sideboard of Michael's deck. It's not a totally unheard of card to play in these 4-color decks, but most often you see it alongside Bring to Light. Michael's just playing it straight up as his go over the top type of card, and we see why. It's a perfect answer to the One Ring. So whereas other 4-color players have had stuff like Emrakul the Promised End or Sundering Titan, it looks like Tibalt is Michael's flavor of choice for that go way over the top in a long game type of effect.
So we saw Friedman try to attack Grief into Tibalt, our little Loki imposter here. But Michael answered with a Flash Solitude to protect the Planeswalker. Friedman followed that up with another copy of the One Ring. I don't know. The One Ring is really, really powerful, but is it going to be enough to pull Friedman back in?
Well, the One Ring is great, but when the other side of the battlefield also involves a One Ring plus multiple Planeswalkers and super powerful gold mythic creatures, I think I know which side I'm betting on.
The Knight's Whisper side, right?
Not the Night's Whisper side. The other thing about this black deck is it has a pretty hard time killing a creature outright, or a planeswalker outright, if it can't threaten it in combat. So, I mean, the one way I could see Ian battling back into this game is having a Sheoldred go unanswered, but that's getting less and less likely, especially with a card like Tybalt on the battlefield.
All right. Friedman, 7, the One Ring. Not much else going on but 3 cards in hand versus Michael with Tybalt, red and 6. Omnath, the One Ring.
Question from chat: Is Ian locked for top 8 already? Certainly not. This is only the first round of day 2, so Ian did as well as possible yesterday. But it looks like now Michael is likely to advance and be one of our top players in the standings. Total of 13 rounds of Swiss. It's too early to say exactly what record you're going to need for top 8, but it's going to be somewhere around the 10 win mark. Like, I could see a 10-3 player either making it or missing it.
Seems unlikely that Friedman would lose all 5 rounds today, but it could happen. We're going to see him try to get back into this one first. Got to start somewhere. Michael didn't do much for drawing a pair of cards on his turn. He must be holding some instants. The One Ring activated, and in response, Leyline Binding.
So there you see Michael correcting the number of burden counters on the One Ring. If you play a lot of Modern, you should recognize this pattern of exiling the One Ring in response to the activation, because the second burden counter going on the ring is actually part of the resolution of the effect. So by exiling it in response, Ian only gets to draw 1 card from the 1 existing burden counter, not 2 from the burden counter that would have been added.
Great. Friedman has cast Grief in response. Michael answered with Veil Summer, and in response to that, Friedman says Sheoldred's Edict. Choosing creature to get Omnath off the battlefield. Grief triggers, but nothing happens. There's 2 Castle Lochthwains. That is a flavor fail.
I think that one should have been legendary.
Well, how can there be 4 Castle Lochthwains? Are there 4 Lochthwain Dukes out there? Or Duchesses?
That's a fine question.
We've entered turns. The red dice denotes first turn of time.
Yeah, so Brad, if there are any viewers at home that are not familiar with tournament procedure, can you walk through what happens when the round runs out of time?
Yeah, we play 5 turns. It doesn't matter who controls them. We almost saw something yesterday where an Emrakul took multiple extra turns out of the 5. And then if there's no definitive winner at the end of the 5th turn and nobody concedes, then the game is a draw.
Yeah, and so Michael's record there, 7 wins, 0 losses, 1 draw, indicates that he may have had a match run out of time yesterday. And this is a draw is better than a loss, but it's still a very bad thing for your tournament prospects in general. It's much better collectively for the 2 players playing if the match can reach a natural conclusion with 1 winner and 1 loser.
Absolutely. I do think that if you've signed up to play 4-color control in Modern, you have signed up to play all 50 minutes of your round and then possibly a few extra turns. This is a person who really enjoys Magic the Gathering and wants to play as much of it as he can.
Yeah, I'll tell you, you better have brought your brown paper bag lunch from home, because you're not going to have much time between rounds to go to get something.
You got to find your friend with the scam deck and give them money, and then they'll go pick you up lunch.
Yeah.
Counterspell. Actual factual counterspell needs an elbow bump. And I think did we just draw? Yeah, we just drew. Well, oh, Michael won?
Yeah, he had the overwhelming position. It was a little bit dicey to parse there whether they ran out of time and Michael would have won, or whether Michael actually did win in the extra 5-turn sudden death. But yeah, we have Michael Wyzakowski dealing the first loss to Ian Friedman. So now we have no players with perfect records remaining in the tournament, and Wyzakowski is going to be, presumably number one, maybe number two in the standings after this. So props to him, and best of luck to both players for the remaining Swiss rounds.
I'm sure we'll see more of both of them. It was the foil cards, Reed. It was the all foil deck that gave him the extra oomph to defeat the undefeated player.
Hey, I was impressed.
Looks like we're going to take a few minutes break just for restrooms. We'll be back in just a moment with more Magic action from MPX Tacoma.